Welcome back to the Artie Lange Show. Our first guest tonight is a guy that looks very, classy and put together. I just have none of these attributes that this guy has. I wish I had just a little bit of this, you probably look at this every day, too. Did you ever have
He does.
First of all, this is David Shaw. He is the head coach of the Stanford Cardinal, head football coach, and a friend of John Ritchie's. Thanks for being here, first of all.
No, thanks for having me. And I was doing stuff for the NFL draft today.
Oh, okay, so you're looking, but
get all spiffed up today.
Okay, now how did it look out there today? Any Stanford guys go?
Zach Ertz went to the Philadelphia Eagles, which I think is a great fit for him. Very excited for him.
Oh, so you're excited? That must be very you're a guy. You become probably at least an older brother figure, if not a father figure, to these guys. And when you see them go into the NFL, you probably know a lot about certain organizations over other. It's got to be hard. Like you're seeing almost one of your kids going somewhere, and if it's not a good fit, that's got to be very difficult for you, right?
Absolutely, and you want to say, what these guys are going to go on. We've helped them grow up. They're going to be men, but you still want to put them in a good position.
Yeah, because they're still really kids. I mean, 22 is not, God, when I was 22, I might as well have been 4 years old. I mean, that's what. But you're happy with Zach's situation?
I'm very excited. Chip Kelly's offense is going to be that wide open spread offense.
Yeah. Right.
He's a guy that knows how to operate in space, man or zone. He gets open, he catches the ball. I think it's going to be a perfect fit for him.
It really is. It's great. And talking about David knowing the NFL, he was actually, people don't realize he was in the NFL for what, 10 years?
9 years.
9 years before he went back to Stanford on Harbaugh's staff.
Now, you played for who in the NFL?
No, he coached.
Oh, coach. You coach for them.
Yeah.
Gosh, I coached for the Philadelphia Eagles for a year, and then the Oakland Raiders for 4 years. We picked up John.
Okay.
And then 4 years with the Baltimore Ravens.
You were involved with getting John in the NFL, then?
Yeah, I don't know how good of an idea that was.
But probably you do know something about heart, because John's an all-heart kind of guy, right? I mean, just turned himself into an NFL player by...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I coached for John Gruden and then worked with Jim Harbaugh, and those guys had something in common. We weren't going to take a player that didn't show toughness.
Right.
And of course, John fit that bill. He was going to go in there, and no matter how much blood was dripping down his face, he was going to go in there and lead with his face again and just be one of those guys that you point to and say, that's how we want to play football.
Well, I respect him a lot with this situation, too, because now he's getting involved with something that he's not totally familiar with. This show is, we call it a sports show. It's, as you've seen from 20 minutes, it's just complete ridiculous. And he's fitting in. It's like there's a comedy part of it. There's a broadcasting part of it. And he's really trying hard, and he's great, so we love him.
Thanks, man.
I could see what you saw in him. Now, you kind of changed. Explain this to me, the way you changed kind of recruiting there. Perennial power with unconventional recruiting mandates. What does that mean?
That all stemmed from a Yahoo article that came out.
Yeah.
And I was asked a question about finding Stanford guys and what stands out about finding Stanford guys. And one of the things that I pointed to was vocabulary.
Right.
And the guy looked at me pretty much like John's looking at me right now. And to me, what it was the Stanford guy stands out, in my opinion. He stands out on the football field. He's a heck of a football player. He stands out in the classroom. He has to in order to get in.
Stanford is like they call it whatever, an Ivy League of the West Coast.
Absolutely.
And it is when you hear Stanford, you think a great football player. You also think future president, maybe.
Absolutely.
Right. It's one of those schools.
So for me, those guys have to stand out. They have to be able to write well. They have to be able to write papers, et cetera, and do their applications. So
I can tell you that Stanford was the only school in the country that I had to apply to.
Right.
Still the only one.
At Division I football, even Notre Dame, who's supposed to be so great with their academics,
right, they'll still be looser.
If you're good enough at football, it's an open door. Yeah,
Right.
come on, join the team. Stanford was the only school in the country that I even had to write my name on a piece of paper for.
Wow.
And I had to write 6 essays. I had to get in through the admissions office before I could go and be a part of the football team.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and including
I had to
Notre
apply
Dame.
twice, including Notre Dame.
Right.
Yeah, including Notre Dame. And I had, because I committed to Bill Walsh originally, verbally, and then rescinded that to go to Michigan. And Bill said, hey, it's an open door. If you ever change your mind, I know this is where you belong. When I told him, hey, I changed my mind, is that door still open? He said, yeah, well, let me send you another application. You have to get in again.
Now, talk about that a little bit as a coach. Is that frustrating to see other colleges getting better players and maybe going ahead as far as becoming a better team when you know, like, hey, you ever think of going to the guys, hey, let's just let them loose on this one grade here because we got to get better? How frustrating is that purely as a football coach?
To be honest, not at all.
Right.
Not at all, because what we learned to do, honestly, is embrace those challenges and say, this is how we're going to find our guys. Our scope is very narrow. We're looking for a specific guy.
Right.
And we've been able to find out. And my dad coached at Stanford in the 70s. He used to say, what people don't understand about the Stanford guys is they're inherently competitive. So if we can get that schoolwork competitive out of them and put it on the football field, guys that have talent, they're going to compete with anybody in the country.
That's a good point.
And we've been able to do that.
That's a good point. Yeah. A really competitive guy. You can see Michael Jordan even like with golf or poker. You know, like no matter what it is, he wants to win, and that feeds
it's how he's built.
Feeds every aspect of his life. So you get a guy go, hey, look, really, really try to do better with writing this essay, and it feeds everything else, right?
So the other thing we look at, honestly, is if a guy is just competitive in football and not competitive in anything else, to me, that's kind of scary. I want a guy that's he's gonna live and die by trying to score one more point than the other team.
If it's that's another good point. If it's a guy who's just interested in kicking ass, if you will, at football or one thing in life, that's not the makings for a great person.
Absolutely,
it's not. Yeah, they're gonna be
I talk all the time about. I'm so fortunate to be where I am, and I'm surrounded by Stanford guys all day.
Right.
These are guys that are going to be successful in football, but also out of football. These guys live and breathe success, and those are the kind of people I want to be around.
Now, I'm trying to do the math in my head, but I assume you worked with Bill Walsh, right?
Bill coached me.
Right. Now describe Bill Walsh and what kind of guy he was.
That's so hard. He coached me for 3 years.
Right.
And then was actually one of my mentors. When I started coaching right out of Stanford. He was the guy that I called. We probably talked at least 10 times a year. And I would come into town and sit in his office. So for me, Bill is just the smartest guy in the room. He's always 2 steps ahead of where you are.
Right.
He gave unbelievable advice. And as a player, every time you walked into the meeting, we would say, Bill's going to say something today that's going to change our futures in football.
Well, that's a pretty unique thing for any coach, you know. I mean, and he was the guy who always had in the NFL. I don't know how real this was, but suppose you had the first 25 plays of the game mapped out every single game, no matter what the game was.
First 15.
The first 15 was it? I thought it was 25. Whatever. I mean, that's still impressive.
Yeah.
And so you're saying a guy who could give you advice on all aspects of life is what you're talking about.
It was amazing because when he stopped coaching, he would go on speaking tours and he would speak to Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
And he would give them advice. It was unbelievable. Everywhere he went, he was the smartest guy in the room. He talked about competitiveness. He talked about knowing who you are and being that. He talked about how to run an organization, and because he went back to his 49er days and how he built a dynasty.
Sure.
He built it on people, competitive people, tough people, smart people, and people that played their roles to a T.
And he created the West Coast offense,
right?
Which it now, in some permutation, is what everyone's
doing.
And his just system, like his itinerary, that a lot of people adopted that. He's got a lot of disciples still in the league. But for everything that was so amazing about this guy, he was so down to earth at the same time. You know, he insisted that even his players call him Bill. You know, not Coach Walsh. It's just Bill.
Mm-hmm. And first year, it did not happen. I mean, we were the first year he was there, we were in awe of him every time, and he would say, "Call me Bill," and we say, "Sure, Coach." We had so much respect for him, and we were in awe of him. Here's this guy with all these Super Bowl rings and coached all these Hall of Famers and all decade teams, et cetera.
Right.
And he was just a guy that wanted you to come in and sit down and talk to him.
Yeah, so humble. And you know, when I told him, "Hey, I'm not going to honor my verbal commitment to you, and I'm going to go to Michigan instead," he was like, "Well, you know, I understand. You made your decision. You believe in it." But then a week later, in the mail, there was a letter from Bill Walsh.
In crayon. Good luck, loser.
No, it was on yellow legal paper.
Right.
And he had this really unique way of writing. It was in pencil on yellow legal paper. It was 7 pages long.
Wow.
On legal paper about how he just really believed that I was a good fit, and he wished me well, and that sort of
It's
thing.
taking a lot of time out of your day.
That
to do
was
that.
after I said I'm not going.